Thank you very much. I'm going to talk to you about wild game, but for people and in wild spaces. What I mean by that is that we have to come to the situation in which we're able to use the resources that are available within the tropical rainforest, not just for the conservation of the rainforests themselves, but actually for the people who use these resources. I want to start by actually showing you a typical picture, Franz Seller's picture of what people were doing, can do, will do in tropical rainforest. Like every picture, it tells different stories. If we look at this picture, we looked at it a few years back, we would have thought that this is the noble savage, the concept of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the wonderful person or persons within the forest themselves that do not attempt to do any harm to the forest or to the animals themselves. Of course, we know now that that concept is a bit outdated, and some people even think it's actually racist. So we've got to move away from thinking that there is this perfect society within anywhere in the world that can actually maintain the wildlife and the resources within tropical rainforests. I want to take it to a personal level and really take us to think more generally about what I thought when I was a young kid, that we should be dealing with ecologically noble savages, people that are able to use the resources that they have in front of them and the knowledge that they have acquired for a number of years to be able to maintain the resources in these areas. And of course, the great conflict that we have nowadays is a conflict between how do we actually conserve the wildlife that's found within rainforests throughout the world, 5.5 million kilometers squares in the Amazon, and 1.8 million in the Congo Basin, for example. How do we maintain the resources within these areas and at the same time allow people to hunt, to be able to use the resources that they have there? And for us, as conservationists, it's often a great, wonderful paradise on Earth, if you want, to be able to look at all these different animals and plants that are found within our areas of rainforests worldwide. What sometimes we don't do is, as we destroy the forests themselves, we're actually destroying millions of people that actually depend on the resources that come out of that forest. And of course, we have about 1,000 rainforest cultures throughout the world, about 50 million people worldwide that are dependent on the resources that come out of that. The food that they use is the food that the forest itself gives them. Caterpillars, for example, is the mainstay of many people living in rainforests in Africa, and they will also use many other animals and hunt these animals to be able to feed their families and even to promote the livelihoods of their societies themselves. When we talk about hunting in rainforests, we tend to think in terms of subsistence and also a certain amount of that meat that goes to the market. The meat that is actually taken from different forests of the world are actually used by many societies, by many groups, to be able to feed themselves, like we have in this picture. But a certain proportion of that meat is sold. And it's fine if you do it at a particular level, at a low level in which a certain portion of what you have hunted can actually be used to be sold in markets nearby to be able to use that money for other things within your household. The problem comes when that commercialization of meat becomes enormous. And the main problem that we have nowadays within certainly rainforests in the Congo Basin and even in Latin America is that there is a very large proportion of meat that's going to the urban centers where people do not really require the meat for their own food security, but it's much more a commodity, much more a luxury, if you want. Within these areas, we have counted about 10 million bushmeat, amounts of bushmeat that are being sold and used by cities all over the world within rainforests. The problem is that when we have such amounts, for example, in the case of the Congo Basin, if you allow that extra commercialization of bushmeat to cities, you're going to find that a very large proportion of these are going away from the people that require this resource. So my question is, even though you come up with possibilities of alternative meats, like in this case sort of chicken, it is fundamental for us to work with the communities themselves to be able to come up with new ways of managing the resources with them so that we can come up with a sustainable harvest of the resources that are there. There are many examples of that happening throughout the Congo Basin and the Amazon Basin, and it is up to us as scientists to be able to participate with the communities, to be able to enjoy, so that they can enjoy the resource that the forest actually gives them. My message is that science, conservation, and communities have got to work together so you make sure that there isn't a loss of biodiversity and a loss of food security for people living within these forests. Thank you.